Good afternoon. We are live at 1 for the Central Pennsylvania Theater and Dance Fest. And I want to lead off today with a great big thank you to all of those out there who donated to help support the festival during Center Gives. Thank you so much. That means the world to us. We're thrilled. So today, as promised, we have an interview with a local writer and poet, Amanda Leigh Passmore-Ott. Amanda has taught English for Penn State since 2004, first at PSU Altoona and then for University Park, World Campus, and continuing education. Classes she teaches include rhetoric and composition in freshman seminar, censorship in America, writing in the social sciences, intro to creative writing, intro to article writing, and intro to J.R.R. Tolkien. Oh goodness, we could go off on that alone. Amanda is a poet, nature writer, hiker, and plays fiddle in the Central Pennsylvania Celtic rock band Full Kilt. She is also a faculty advisor for the PSU Irish Dance Group, which I'm not going to pronounce. I'll have her do that. And her poems can be found in such journals as Blue Line, a literary magazine dedicated to the spirit of the Adirondacks, Albatross, The Snowy Egret, and Wavelength. So without further ado, let's welcome Amanda Leigh Passmore-Ott.
Hi.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for joining us today at Live at 1. It is a pleasure to have you. Yeah, awesome. So we're going to cover a lot of topics today because you are a very busy person who does a lot of things.
I do.
Yeah. I guess, pandemic aside, so many of us wear different hats, but you teach so many different courses. You yourself are a writer. You work in many different forms of writing, many different genres. And we were talking the other day, and you brought up a form that I am only slightly familiar with called now I can't remember what it's called.
A hybin.
Hybin, thank you. So I wonder, for folks like myself and others listening, can you explain to us what that is?
Sure. I'm a little new to the form myself. I just discovered it a couple of months ago, and I thought this is a perfect form for me because I love writing poetry, and in particular lyric poems, which tend to be a little shorter, very imagistic, and of course a haiku is very much along those lines. And I also write lyric narrative. And so a hybin is kind of a combination of the two. It's like two poems in one. I prefer to call the prose portion lyric narrative, but you could call it a prose poem. And then usually combined with some form of haiku. And there's no set rule. Like some people like to have maybe the haiku first and then the narrative after. Some people I've even seen have a haiku narrative, another haiku. I'm trying to keep it very traditional since I'm new to the form. I really believe in knowing the rules and following them before you understand how to then break the rules. So I'm doing like the prose poem first, and then I follow that with a haiku. And I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, but this form was really popularized in the 17th century by Japanese poet Matsubasho. Yes. So that's sort of where the form originates from. So,
okay, yeah. That's fascinating. I love learning about new forms of poetry. And I think for people who aren't, well-versed in poetry, the idea that there are different forms is always exciting to kind of learn that too. And it can be an inspiration, like you say, to sort of stay within those rules, but also know the rules so you can break them. I like that. Not that that's in any of your syllabuses, right? And your syllabi don't.
No, but I do tell especially my intro to creative writing students, when we get into the poetry unit, they always grumble like, oh, I have to write a sonnet. Like, this is going to be so hard. But then at the end of the semester, they do like a poetry portfolio, and I say, there are no rules now. Like, if you want to take that sonnet and you had a lot of trouble with the form, keep the content, break the rules, you can do whatever you want. But it's important, I think, to try your hand at it first. Mm-hmm. Continue to understand the fundamentals, and then you can more effectively, I think, deviate from things. So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So one of the reasons we're having you on Live at 1 is to feature a reading that is coming up. As folks probably know at this point, the festival is happening in June, the 11th through the 13th, virtually. But up until then, there's many opportunities to sort of experience literary arts, the spoken word, and theatrical and dance. And you're one of our poetry features in a content called Words. And it will be featuring you Wednesday, May 19th at 7 p.m. The event is free to tune in. Again, it will be virtual. And there is a long link, which I'm not certainly going to read, but that can be found by going to the Central Pennsylvania Theater and Dance Fest website there, right there. Okay. So I want to invite you today. This is exciting. We can't always get a dancer to join us and demonstrate their art, but we can, and we have asked you to read one of your poems for us. So I'm going to hand the stage over to you to read one of your pieces. Thanks, Amanda.
Sure. So I'm going to read a poem called A Winter Migration, and this is from a chapbook manuscript that I just finished called Human Wilderness. A Winter Migration. The pine siskins have come south and evening grosbeaks east. I wait for an appearance at our feeders as I have waited for tundra swans near the river where the monks of St. Bernardines keep their silent hours. In the deep snowy conifers, there is also silence, where if the bird sang, it would sound as a choir. Sometimes I feel as if I have been waiting all my life for the shadow of a white wing to glide above in night migration, or the glimpse of yellow feathers fleeting as an after-image of the sun behind closed lids. And sometimes we wait for all those things others have heard and we have never seen. I've become stone myself in the cracks between logs, peeking up at a sky full of wings, and for a while it would work. I would forget myself, my own voice buried like some small animal asleep under the snow. I thought solitude a place until it disappeared. But I don't mean to make this about me, but the birds, between and beneath them, where silence and syllables collide.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I am just taken by your the natural flow of your language, but you know, I'm a big fan that poetry should be heard out loud.
Me too.
Yeah. And especially if you work, you know, as a teacher. I mean, that's kind of inherent that you have to listen and being in that state of listening. I hope folks will tune in on Wednesday because it'll be delightful to hear, you know, you featured as a reader during the Words on Wednesday, May 19th at 7 p.m. So let's talk a little bit more about you personally, Amanda, and your work as a writer. So what are some of the goals that you have maybe coming up in the near future or the far future as a writer?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm always just looking to continue the craft. Sometimes as a teacher, it's really tough. I teach a lot of classes. I teach 5 writing classes every semester. So sometimes I feel like all my writing is done on breaks or through the summer. So I really just wanted to set the goal for myself this summer to work on that new Hyben project. And my goal is to write a poem a week. If I write more, that's great. But a poem a week, and then, you know, by the end of the year, I will have enough for, you know, a full collection. So that's sort of where I'm at now. And I'm also circulating that Human Wilderness chapbook manuscript that I'll be reading from mostly on Wednesday. So, you know, just always keep writing and write what I know, which is mostly about nature, my hikes, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially Central Pennsylvania is so beautiful. You know, obviously the festival is virtual this year, but we hope that folks look forward to the next year and realize that a trip to Central Pennsylvania allows you not only to experience the arts, but also it is so, I don't know, maybe it's this spring in particular, it's so like the colors and the sky and, you know, what's blooming, you know, pollen aside. I mean, and you try to get out in nature a lot. I know that's important to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, I go hiking several times a week, and now that I'm not teaching, I try to get out every day if I can.
Yeah.
Sometimes that that doesn't always work, but I kind of live by the motto too that nature heals. So especially this past year, I tried to spend as much time out in nature as possible. And that's where I get my inspiration for almost all of my art. Maybe not so much the music, I've been to Ireland a couple of times, so I get my inspiration from there, but my writing and even some of, like, I used to paint. I want to get back into that this summer as well. It's very nature inspired.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And, teaching that many classes, time is precious. And, being able to take so many, what do we call them? Forest bathing, right? When you're able to be in nature like that, it's really, really a blessing. And to turn it into your art is really powerful too.
Yeah.
Do you travel with a notebook when you're walking?
Oh yeah, my husky Anoko. Yeah. So my students are very familiar with Anoko because I talk about her all the time. And when I pull the big screen up in my classroom, she's usually my screensaver as well. But almost all of my hiking, I'm never really hiking alone. My husband goes with me a lot as well when he's off of work. But if he can't make it, I always take a Noko along. So he's like,
oh, and a Noko and a notebook. That's what I was saying too. A
notebook. Yeah. Sometimes I do, but I like to rely, this sounds really weird, but I take my cell phone along and I take a lot of pictures. So I also do sort of amateur photography, and I like to capture those moments. And then when I get home, I like to look back at those pictures. And sometimes that's the spark that gets me writing a poem. And especially for the Highbin project, I'm going to be using my own photography in connection with that. So each Highbin will be accompanied by an inspiring photograph that it's based upon. So
that's beautiful because you're actually then present in the moment in nature, capturing a moment and letting it inspire you later. That's beautiful. Excellent. So maybe we're already kind of talking about this, but what if I'm always interested in what a writer's process is. So you talked a little bit about letting nature inspire you. Any other parts of your process for those budding writers out there?
Sure, yeah. I think everyone has their own system. I know so many, especially if I don't have kids, but a lot of my colleagues have kids. And so they'll set like an hour, like 5 a.m. each day. I'm going to get up and write before the day starts. I can't work on that kind of a regimented schedule. I tried it. I can't force it. So I tend to write in spurts. I don't necessarily wait till like that proverbial like muse inspires me. I think sometimes you can wait around forever if you're waiting on that muse to appear. But I like to write in these spurts. I sort of have this creative bursts, if you will. And I do a lot of free writing as well. So I just write whatever comes to my mind. I don't necessarily sit down and say, I'm going to write a poem today, or I'm going to write a lyric essay. I just start writing. And then sometimes I'll go back to my free writes and I say, you know what, I really love this line. This line has to be in a poem, or I like this phrase. That would make a great title for this lyric narrative that I've been working on. So my process is kind of fluid and just, it's not very regimented. That's just the way I work. I know some people really have to have that schedule. It doesn't work for me. I think the important part is, though, it's just you have to keep writing. I remember, I hope I don't embarrass him saying this. One of my undergraduate professors, he's also local writer in State College, Steve Sherrill. I remember when I graduated and I first started teaching at Penn State Altoona, and he said, you know what, just make sure that you write. Because so many teachers become teachers and cease to be writers. So the important thing is just you have to be both, right? So that phrase, that statement he said always sticks with me. So
yeah, and that's powerful. And that sort of mentorship is such a big part of any process. I mean, we certainly, the voices that we have in our heads and that are inspiring, and those moments that you remember. It's like you saying about like, I like this line that I wrote today and what can I do with it? The ability to sort of go back and edit and reform is, it sounds like that's part of your process as well. And that's really important for people to realize. Like, it's not about being regimented if that doesn't work for you, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
You just have to do whatever works for you. And the important thing is to write. You don't have to sit down and say, I have to crank out so many poems because I'm working on this project. It's just write and it will come.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Good advice. Good advice for many things. So, did you always want to be a writer? I mean, was that something early on, or can you maybe think back to an inspiration from your earlier life? Or
Sure, yeah. I mean, definitely, I went through the stages all little kids go through. Like at one time, I was into horses. I wanted to be a jockey, and then we went to I think it was SeaWorld. I'm like, I want to ride dolphins, and then you start getting older and it's like that's not feasible. But I was writing from elementary school. I remember our elementary school had this little writing contest and I won that, and I always loved to write. I was always writing little stories. And then you had mentioned in the intro, my bio, I once taught a class on the introduction to J.R.R. Tolkien. So he was sort of like my first love in terms of a writer. I started reading him when I was about in 4th grade. And he just really inspired me. At first, I thought, I want to be like Tolkien and I want to create all these worlds. And then when I finally got to college and I was taking different creative writing classes, I noticed I was spending 5 pages describing the setting. And one of my teachers, it was in a fiction class, and he's like, gotta learn to cut this back. And then he said, have you ever tried writing poetry? And I'm like, yeah, I like poetry, and kind of fell into that niche then after that. But yeah, I mean, I've always loved to write, loved to create, whether it was writing, music, drawing. I've always done all 3 of those things.
Yeah, and in your Celtic band, Full Kilt, that's a great name, by the way. Yeah. So you play fiddle.
I do. Yeah, I started playing violin when I was 8 years old, and the school system. So I'm a huge supporter of arts in local schools. It's so important because if I didn't have that program, I wouldn't be where I am today. So very important. So yeah, I played basically classical violin up through college. Even I did some undergrad at Penn State Altoona. I was in the Ivy Side string quartet for a while, but I was always a closet fiddle player. That was my love. I loved the Chieftains when I was a little kid, which is, if you know Irish music, you know who the Chieftains are. And so I was a closet fiddle player. And then I met my front man, Mike Zerby. He was with another popular band at the time, the Michael O'Brien Band. And I handed him a business card that said Irish Fiddler. And that day we talked and he said, I'm looking for a fiddle player for a project I'm working on called Full Kilt. And then that was probably 16 years ago.
Wow.
And been in the band ever since. Yeah.
That's great. And obviously during the pandemic, there haven't been opportunities, but I do hope that we can start, checking your website for gigs that down the road, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I see they have our website right here in the front. Yeah. You can go there and click on show times, and I run that website. So I'm the one that's constantly updating the show times. And we do have quite a few coming up here in the summer. So making up for lost time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think many of us will be doing that in many ways.
Yes.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to wrap it up here. And I wanted to leave with sort of an inspiration to those watching today and down the road. So if you could tell your younger self, especially your writing self, something, what would it be?
I would say do what you love and don't let anybody tell you that you shouldn't do that. I can't count how many times my younger self heard, if you go into writing or music, you can't make a career out of that. You'll never make any money. And they were trying to push me into, well, let's go visit this college and look at paralegal, which nothing wrong with being a paralegal, not for me. Or at one point, I thought, I love going into psychology just because that was interesting, but my heart wasn't in it. So, yes, you have to think about, making a living wage. Those things are important, but I think it's more important to do the things that you love. And you can't let people discourage you from that. I think that's just so important, especially for kids that are maybe in theater, music, dance, writing, in middle and high school, and that's what they love to do. And yet everyone else is telling them, no, it's not feasible. Don't go into that. There is a pathway forward. There is a way to make a living at the things that you love to do, and you should stay on that path, right? Don't deviate from it. Just follow yourself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And, many people enjoy the arts and participate as, on a hobby level too. But, part of what you're saying too is, just trust, right? Like trust yourself.
Trust yourself.
You love what you love.
Yeah. And, to share that with other people, I think is a gift in and of itself, right? Yeah.
Beautiful.
And inspire other people.
Yeah. And that's what we, hope that this festival, in the summer, but also throughout the year, brings inspiration, such as your reading. One more reminder to the folks watching: Wednesday, May 19th at 7 p.m. You can tune in, and it will be an entire broadcast that Amanda will be reading from. There we go. Beautiful. And I believe the link to get to it will be on the website. So you'll go to the website to find out that link. So Amanda, this has been such a pleasure. I'm thrilled to have met you, and I look forward to seeing you on Wednesday and, throughout the festival as well. And I hope down the road we can actually meet in person.
Same. Thank you for having me. And I'm so excited to read on Wednesday.
Yeah, beautiful. So thank you, everyone, for joining in and spending some time with us live at 1. We will be back with you Tuesday at 1 o'clock. And until then, enjoy the sunshine and just write. Bye.